everybody. Welcome to episode number 57 of Collectible Live. Today is Sunday, January the 8th, 2023, and my name is Jeremy Lee. I want to thank everyone who joined us last time with our guest Bob Means from eBay. You can check that out on both the Sports Cards Live and the Collectible YouTube channels if you have not seen them already. But we are going to bring out this week's guest, passionate collector, Matthew Cirulnick. Welcome to Collectible Live, and how are you on this fine Sunday, sir?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you bet. It's good to have you, and I want to let everybody know. Post your questions, your comments. We're gonna integrate them into the episode. And Matt, we didn't really know each other until we were both invited onto Rob Gerard's podcast at the end of 2022, where we met live for the first time in his studio.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, we had a great episode with him. Chris McGill from Card Ladder was the third panelist, along with you and me. And then it's really funny because, as coincidence would have it, Ezra from Collectible messaged me a few days later saying, "Hey, by the way, Matty C Collection is going to be your guest on Collectible Live coming up." And I said, I wrote back and said, "Well, isn't that great? We've already done some content together, have a good rapport. So, and you're somebody who I wanted to talk to more and learn more about, and really." Help you get your message out there, being how you approach the hobby and all of that, because I have a lot of respect for how you approach the hobby as far as your own collection goes. But let's start off with something sort of outside the hobby for you, which is, I grew up in the 80s and I saw the movie Rambo, and Rambo was, Rambo, Rocky, and all that. You happen to be the person who wrote the final movie in the Rambo saga, Rambo 5: Last Blood, right? You wrote that, did you not?
Yeah, with Sly, with Stallone, not just by myself. We did it as a team.
Well, so
he wrote the Rocky screenplay. He's a fantastic writer. I learned a ton from him.
But so let me just imagine it. So there you are. Hey, Rock, or hey, Sly, I'll be over in 15 minutes. We're going to continue writing this movie, and you guys would get together and write this thing out. I mean, what was it like working with Sylvester Stallone?
Oh my God. It's surreal. I mean, first of all, he's the most down to earth, fantastic, natural guy ever, and really puts you at ease. But being born in '76, when Rocky came out, it's still, of all the people I've worked with, it still would be moments of, when we're going over dialogue and he's reading it, and I'm like, wait, that's Rambo reading the Rambo dialogue. So it's that part of it, the 10, 12, 13-year-old, 14-year-old in me who grew up such a fan of him. It's similar to if you see a baseball player today and you're a baseball fan, it's a tremendous amount of respect. But when I ran into Don Mattingly at the Grove one time here in Los Angeles, I turned into a 10-year-old again and could barely speak. So there's something about the idols you had from your childhood that have you can't shake that.
And especially when they sort of transcend culture or just become such an integral part of North American culture. I mean, Sylvester Stallone, Rocky, Rambo, that's a big deal. Anyway, it's pretty cool, man. And it's as far as being a hobbyist, all of us hobbyists, most of us have something else in our life. We have a hobby as a hobby. The hobby is truly our hobby, even though for many people, myself included, it's become more than just a hobby now. But it is a hobby, and we all have our other interests, our families, our careers, and you never, unless you talk to somebody, you don't know where people come from, what their backgrounds are, what their vocation is, and it's we have athletes collecting. We have screenwriters in Hollywood like yourself that are collecting. We have accountants, doctors, tons of dentists in the hobby. So it's just
one of them.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get into more, I do want to discuss and just share a bit of a sneak peek into the press release that is going to be issued tomorrow by Collectible. So let me just get into that for a second, Matt, and then we're going to get back to you and we'll say hello to the chat. So tomorrow, in a press release, and I have permission to share this, Collectible will be announcing the next evolution of their platform, as they will be unveiling a competitive bidding process with a fractional component for high-end collectibles. All right, so more to this. The process known as the BWIC, Bids Wanted in Competition, something I'm not too familiar with, but I plan to get more familiar with it. Again, Bids Wanted in Competition is what this is called, frequently used in the public financial markets, and it will increase the liquidity. So liquidity will be increased on the collectible platform through this innovative and exclusive 2-round sealed and competitive bidding process. It also provides objective price discovery, which I think is maybe the cool factor, one of the really cool parts of this whole thing. The launch also includes collectibles foray for the first time outside of sports cards and memorabilia and into graded comic books and video games, TCG or trading card games like Pokemon, Magic, those sorts of things, as well as sports art. And in addition, it is their first foray into international expansion efforts, as bidding will be open to collectors and investors all over the world. So a few really nice progressive initiatives by Collectible, and again, being announced formally tomorrow. So I also want to let everybody know, next Sunday on the show on Collectible Live, CEO Ezra Levine will be our guest, and he will come on to discuss and answer some questions on really how this BWIC, or Bids Wanted in Competition, process will work. And he'll take more questions on that innovation that they're about to unleash later this month. So exciting stuff. And with that, Matt, I know it's a lot of words there, but I'm looking forward to the press release tomorrow. And of course, Ezra coming on here next week, next Sunday at this time, to discuss it further. And with that, let's get on with the show. Matt, before we do say hello to the chat, I want to start with what may be a simple question, or it is a simple question, but it may or may not have a simple answer. And that is simply, why do you love sports cards?
Okay, well, yeah, it won't be a simple answer, and I'll try not to make it a 40-minute answer. Different cards you're drawn to, or I'm drawn to, for different reasons. Among them, and there's no ranking of it. Some cards I'm into because of the player, and it's not just his performance; it's his story, his biography, right? Like with Mantle, for example, I've read a lot about him. The things he overcame early in his life, the injury he overcame in 51, the pressures he overcame, being on the verge of quitting at one point. And that's just him as an example. So many players have compelling biographies that inspire you. Other times it's the aesthetics of the card. You know, one of my cousins and I, we talk about the 86 Topps Mattingly and how it's just pop art. It's just beautiful. The black and the white and the pull focus background. 73 Munson comes to mind, same thing. 74 C. So sometimes it's the photography, sometimes it's the design of the card, what Topps or Donruss or Fleer did. Other times it's the rarity. There's so many different. Sometimes it's just pure nostalgia, childhood nostalgia. You know, Darryl Strawberry card I posted today. You know, so there are many reasons why a different card would appeal to me.
And were you, like you said, you were born in 76, the year Rocky came out. So you're old enough and young enough to have opened up packs throughout the 80s, and the nostalgia of being a kid in school, opening packs, taking them to school, trading them at recess, opening those when they were actually, we still call it wax, but when they were actually wrapped in wax paper, the gum. Do you have is any of your interest in cards, or to what extent is your interest in cards kind of tied back to those experiences of opening them up? You get that white dust on your fingers from from the gum, and the smell of it all, and the taste of the gum, and then flipping through those cards, looking for your favorite players, or looking for the last card you needed for the set that year. Do you draw on that nostalgia today?
That's where it all comes from. It all stems from that. For me, it was 86. I was 10. You know, both my cousins were into cards. One of them, the younger one, called me and was like, "You need to get this 86 Donruss. It's called Jose Canseco. There's a rated rookie logo." I'm like, "What's that? What are you talking about?" And then went to the corner. They didn't have Donruss. They had Topps. I opened some packs and looked at a Gooden record breaker and was like, "Wow, this guy looks awesome," and just sort of got into it from there. So it all stems from being a kid. I think nostalgia to a great extent, even some of the cards we first circle back to get after years, college, whatever, being out of the hobby, you come back and the first things you get are the things that you coveted as a kid, right? So it's like, oh, I'm getting that 84 good and update that I never saw. And then of course, then there are things that you pine for as a kid, mantle cards. You know, the only time I saw certain mantle cards was in the pages of CCP guide or Beckett guide. That's the closest I came to those. So so it all comes back to being a kid. I'm sure you could find your way to cards as an adult, but I think the original seed has to be planted in boyhood, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. If the attraction currently is really, I say attraction, but it's more like it's like the collector DNA. It's in our blood. It's a part. It becomes a part of you, especially if you grew up in those 70s, 80s, or even before, and you were opening up packs. You mentioned the 86 Donruss Jose Canseco, the rated rookie symbol. I have a quick anecdote on that, Matt. Back in probably 1989, I traded away, would have been 89, maybe it was 90, 91. I traded away remember when car stereos were things that had faceplates and you took the faceplates off?
Out the Benzie box.
Right. Yeah. I had an in-dash CD player for my car. I traded it to my LCS back in the day for a Jose Canseco Donruss rookie card.
Dude, I remember the one time I got my hands on an 84 Topps Mattingly, because the Donruss was like unheard of, like 84 Donruss Mattingly, especially in New York City. It was like, does this thing exist? I didn't know any kids who had it. And I grew up in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. But one time I traded the kid across the street for his Topps. And then like his uncle came over and was like, nah, man, we're redoing that. You get it back. I was like, come on, man, we closed the deal. So, I mean, there's certain, so it's not just the packs, it's also, but packs is a huge part. I remember finding different packs at different stores. It's, again, that's all wrapped up in the nostalgia. But there's certain cards that you pine for as a kid that you couldn't find. And they took on, a mystique that they retain to this day.
For sure. So do you have you collected the whole way through, going back to the mid 80s? Have you been collecting all the way through till today? Did you take any time off? And if so, what got you back in?
I collected probably from 86 to 90, 91, then didn't in high school. And then so I didn't do that in high school then, and not too much in college at all. But after college, when I came back, when I got my first sort of apartment, because I spent a few months after college when I first started writing, I didn't even really have a place to live. I started writing movies right out of college. And so it was like hotel to hotel. But once I got settled in someplace, I got a Miss Pac-Man machine and started buying, boxes of 75 minis from like the baseball card kit. And then it just started going. My brother and I ripped like 4 boxes of 75 minis back then. But again, because 75s to us, it's also one thing to mention. I think a big part of what we pursue are the things we also were in awe of. It's not just the things we didn't have that became these chimeras. It's the kid down the block, one person who had a 68 Ryan and a giant screw down. And before wiffle ball, we'd be like, yo, man, let's see it. Let's take it out. My cousin was the only person who had Reggie in like this velvet pouch with the, it's like a big, the pageantry of, oh, I'm going to take out the Reggie now. So that's also how certain cards were exposed to us.
And it's funny because today we see now people with their special Zion cases carrying around their high-end cards in very nice holders, graded slabs with other holders to hold that graded slab, and then they pull it out. It's very similar now to showing off a high-end card the way it was back then. Yeah. When I remember in the 80s going to an LCS. There was one LCS when I grew up in Winnipeg in Canada, and there was this one LCS that I knew of that had a Bobby Orr rookie card in one of those 1-inch screw downs behind the counter on a high shelf. And I used to go in there and just stare at it thinking, this thing is like, it's a unicorn. You never see those. It's an amazing piece. It's a treasure, a true prized possession. I'll probably never own one of those. Then the internet comes along, and more and more pop up. There's more accessibility and just the availability, the opportunity to own more and more of them, so they don't become that rare. But I hear you. I grew up thinking I'm never going to own that card, and when I finally bought one, I think for the first time in about 2008, I felt like I'd made it in life, because I had coveted this and dreamt about it for I don't know, 30 years at that point. So it's pretty cool, as you mentioned, the way you mentioned that.
Absolutely.
So let's before we get into your approach to the hobby, and this is where I think you add valuable insight and perspective for people. But first, let's say hello to the chat. Big C7 is with us. What's up with you? Loud Collector is here. Happy Sunday. Sports MD Card Collector, good evening. Splendid Sports Cards calls you Maddie Eye Appeal, and that's a bit of a preview into your approach. Luke Allen, what's up, Maddie? And Jay Lee, Bleecker Street Cards, good to see you, Luke. Loud says the last dialogue line in Last Blood was so well deserved for the entire Rambo series. Thank you, Matt. There you go. A little shout out on your work. Jerry Hodge, good evening to you. Peeps, what's going on? Contender Sports Card says, why wasn't the gum wrapped in its own wrapper inside of the packs? Probably the same reason why, I remember, Thrills gum?
No.
Thrills gum, purple little chiclet things that taste like soap. I mean, they used to come just loose in the box. Now they come in those sealed kind of vacuum pack packages. I mean, let's face it, Contender, up until, I don't know, 20 years ago, there was food safety wasn't as important or as tended to as it is today. I think that's the simple reason for that. But any comments on that, Matt? Back then, I mean, the gum, it could poke through the wax paper if it was shaken up, and it could have been something could have been done to it.
Quality control was always an issue. I remember my cousin once got, was it the Conseco 86 Donruss out of a pack? They were all off, and he was like, I'm writing to the company or something, because it was, I mean, they were butchered. It was quality control was not. I mean, that's why centering became so rare, because you pull cards out of the pack. I mean, 75. I remember the 75 minis, especially opening box after box with my brother. Like, when are we going to get a centered card?
And that the 75 Topps design in baseball is very easy to identify the centering, because of the way the top color kind of cuts off to the bottom color, and you can just measure those where they connect. That's what I look to, those two little lines on either side of the card.
Me too.
So, but you're right, quality control back then, I don't even think it was a priority, because there's so many cards that came out of the packs with either rough edges or just off-centered or completely miscut. And even back then, that might have been there might have been a premium placed on some crazy miscuts back then. Now we want centered cards. Quick hello to Diamond Card Collector and Foul Fireball. Jeremy, good to see you guys. We had a good segue there, Matt, into quality control and centering. So why don't you share with the audience what your approach is? How do you when you're looking for a certain card, what is your process, and what are the various criteria that you look to?
Well, the first thing I do is I do not at all get wedded to a grade, because if I'm wedded to a grade, even if I like a card that presents like an 8 or a 9 or a 10, ideally, I mean, who wouldn't? It automatically precludes you from finding what I think are the best cards to find in the hobby, which are cards that are 2s and 3s and 4s that look like 8s, 9s, and 10s. So the first thing I will do is not at all shop for a grade. The next thing I do is I scour all examples. I try to get a gauge for what the problems are with a card. Do I see every example is off-center? That's what struck me about the 52 Mantle. Once I decided, I want one of these, I'd never held one until I bought my first one in my 30s. And I remember shopping for it and being like, literally 99.9% of these cards are off-centered. 51 Bowman Mantle, it was not only they off-centered, but they have these 2 lines and they're blurry. Looking at the photo, when you see one that's registered and you see one that's not of the 51 Bowman, it's almost like you can't look at one that's not registered. So that I'll try to find the problems that are endemic to that card. 76 Brett, it's got a lot of problems. Then what I'll do is I'll look around and see, I'll reject anything that doesn't strike me as really well centered. And even before that, anything where the image is not clear.
Let me ask right there. Because when it comes to grading and it comes to just the general narrative in the hobby, centering is like way up here and then corners, edges, and surface seem to be kind of down here together. Surface maybe even below edges and corners. For me, surface I consider to be the most important, and I include in surface the registration, as you quickly alluded to there. So why don't you quickly discuss what is registration and where does it rank compared to centering and the other attributes?
To me, they're both. They if anything, registration for me is how the inks are laid, and does that create an image that has precision to it or not? You can see errors in registration. For example, again, take the standard bearer of the hobby, the 52 tops mantle. Many of them, if you start looking for it, you'll see the top of his cap has a bit of a blur. Others, the inks were all laid the way they were intended, and the cap's in perfect focus. 68 Ryan, possibly, certainly one of the most iconic cards of its decade. Same thing. If you look to the left of their faces, Ryan's cap, Ryan's face, that could almost be like a doubling or a shadow effect or blur. So that's what I consider registration. For me, the image I'm looking at is paramount. Imagine buying a photograph. Let's say you're a photograph collector, whether it's a Type 1 or an Andreas Gursky. You're not going to buy one where the focus is messed up, because that's what your eyes are looking at. Secondly, you want it framed evenly, right? So to me, eye appeal is primarily a function of the quality of the image and how evenly framed that image is, right? If you buy a painting, you're not going to frame it with 3 inches of frame on the left and 1 inch of frame on the right. You're not going to hang it crookedly on your wall, right? So to me, it's pretty basic in terms of what contributes to eye appeal. And I think it's also human nature that the eye is drawn inwards to the central image. Therefore, my eyes will go from the outside in. I'm not spending much time looking at the corners. I'm also not holding my cards like this, right? And I'm not looking at them under a loop. So when I put my cards on a wall display, or I have my cards in hand at a casual distance like this, corner wear goes away first. I could see bad centering from 20 feet away, right? So, and then I consider the fact that the maker, how was it intended? The card was intended, certainly by design, whether it's a 52 tops or 75 tops, card was intended to be centered. And the card was also intended to be handled by children. So where to me seems natural, centering to me seems like the ideal state. So a centered card with a good image, certainly the image was intended to be focused. It's photographs. So a centered, focused card with some wear to me seems ideal, whereas bad centering or bad focus is a defect right out of the factory and therefore less desirable. But that's to me.
No, I'm 100% with you. You use the term focus, and really that's what registration is. It's how focused is the image on the card. It's like as you said, they were intended to be focused, just like you wouldn't go buy an image, or if you collect photographs, you want one that has focus. Same thing when you're taking a picture with your iPhone nowadays. If you take one and you look at it after, oh, it's a little blurry because you should, you're going to delete it and retake it right away. There's nothing the last thing that I would add to my collection is a high grade card, like a near mint or a gem mint card graded by a third party grader that is out of focus. I don't care how well centered, how sharp the corners are, how smooth those edges are. If that image is out of focus, it's not going to get its way into my collection, even at a very good price. It might make its way into my inventory at a good price, but it's not making its way into my personal collection.
Yeah. I won't bid. I don't, and again, to each their own. I'm not here to proselytize or convert or tell people how to collect. I'm just here to share my, answer the questions and share my perspective. I won't bid. I see like a vintage Mantle 9 at an auction house sells for 100, 200 grand. I'm like, well, I won't even bid on it. Right. It's not, because that's not where my income comes from. I understand why a dealer would at a certain price want to sell it. But to me, the aesthetics, the beauty of the item I'm looking at matters to me. And I'm looking at the item, right? I'm not looking at the sticker above the item that tells me what someone else thought about it, right? What matters is what I think about it.
I'm with you. It almost feels like a revolutionary approach to sports card collecting, because many people are looking first at the label above the card to see what the grade is. And maybe it's because some people just don't have that skill. They don't know what to look for. They love these things. Maybe they don't know what to look for. But I think that people can be trained on that, or can just get used to knowing what to look for by consuming content, looking at more and more cards. And what you said before was really key. You will look at several examples of a card to figure out what its common flaws and issues are, so that you can find a copy that will be void of those flaws or issues, or minimized if there's something there, no matter what. And you called out a few that are commonly out of registration or out of focus. And I draw attention to the 48 Leaf Jackie Robinson, probably my favorite baseball card of all time. Oftentimes it is out of focus, and you can see that shadow. The Wilt Chamberlain 61 Fleer rookie. One of the easiest ways to see if the registration is perfect or not is you look under his armpit, and there's a slim white line between the color of his arm and the color of the background, and you know that it's just there was a slight registration issue. And sometimes it's very common. Of course, the Wayne Gretzky O-Pee-Chee rookie is notorious, where we look at how that little oil drop within the Oilers logo is placed on the corner of the card. So registration, hugely important. But again, as you said, we're not here to tell people how to collect. I know some very accomplished collectors who don't care about the card. All they care about is the grade, because they want to compete on the set registry. But that's not for me. What do you think of that approach?
Again, what is paramount is that the collector is enjoying themselves and having a good time and happy, right? So if that's the case, fine. For me, I can't get with that. The notion of bond, because you could say that that's not collecting cards, that's collecting the stickers to play a game online, is what that is. Because it's about the GPA on a website and competition, but it's competition about those stickers and what number was put on those stickers. It's not competition for what card looks prettier. I mean, they got to call it what it is. So that's a different game. That's not a game that I play, especially for my sign cards, because they, what I like about those, they really defy that type of reductive, what box does it go in? Because you can have a 9 grade card with an autograph, but if the autograph is placed in the wrong place or it's faded, so what? Right? You could have a beautiful autograph, but if the card is really, really beat up and OC and blurry, so what? So you can't just go, well, that's a high sticker, so it's great. You can't. You could have high grade in one or the other, and it could be terrible. So it kind of forces you to live outside that paradigm of obeying the number from whatever grader said what that day.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the term OC. Just if anybody doesn't know, that means off center. There's lots of common acronyms in our hobby. The other thing I want to point out, just to be fair and to play both sides, is that there are some cards that are in 9 slabs and 10 slabs. So graded 9 or 10, gem mint or mint or mint plus, that are worthy of those high grades, that are extremely beautiful. But if I'm correct, Matt, and following, and you have to, if anyone out there, if you're not yet following Matt on Instagram, his Instagram handle is on the ticker right now at MattyC_collection. You have to follow, because he's always showing examples of where, a card graded by, say, PSA as a 4 might present a lot nicer than a card graded by PSA as a 7. And there's a lot of money that can be saved, yet the card in your collection will be just as nice, if not nicer, based on eye appeal. However, the technical reasons why that card is a 4 versus the technical reasons why the opposing card is a 7 may be completely legitimate. There could be reasons outside of the way they look, outside of the registration and the centering. There could be something wrong with the back. There could be a minor crease on the back of the card that makes it a 4 or a 3, but everything else about it is beautiful. I mean, that's a wonderful card to own at a fraction of the price of what without that crease or that little wrinkle on the back. That 3 or 4 could be a 7 or 8 or a 6 or a 7, whatever. And that could be tens of thousands of dollars of difference in some cases. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, there are cards that are graded accurately, that have attributes that create eye appeal that is superior to higher graded cards. Then you have cards that are flat out misgraded, cards that are 7 that you crack it out tomorrow, it could be a 9, right? Certainly when you go from one grade to the adjacent grade, that's where, almost any card that's high end for its grade, if you cracked it and resubmitted it 10 times, it's going to come back in another number half the time. That proves to me that, and I've had it happen, I experimented with that decade ago. When you see that happen over and over again, you go, well, wait a minute, why am I putting so much stock and so much money into these stickers when today's 9 is tomorrow's 10, today's 10 is tomorrow's 9, this 8 could be an 8.5 or a 7.5 or a 6. Once you see how inconsistent it can be, it's just to me the only logical choice after that was to put the satisfaction my eyes receive from the card as the most important thing and the only thing that matters, right? And certainly, like you said, there are 9s and 10s that are accurately graded. That's fantastic. But I think the best 9 is the one that the collector buys in an 8 holder, and the best 10 is the one he finds in an 8 or sometimes a 7.5 holder. Certainly better in a 10 is better to find in a 9 than a 10, yeah. Right? And then again, I think that if I could find a card that pleases my eye, that's it comes down to what people define as best, right? Like the grading company, I remember one of their mottos, buy the best you can afford. What does that really mean though? You want me to buy the highest grade, your highest grade? So that way you can, tweet about that and say, look, our 10 sold for this record number, right? Or is the best card pound for pound the best card, right? If I buy a 10 that looks like a 9, to me, that's pound for pound much worse than if I buy a 1 that looks like a 4. That card's the winner. Yeah. If I have a Donruss Mattingly in a 10, 84, and a friend of mine, collecting buddy through Instagram, has an 8.5, looks identical to me. That 8.5 is better than my 10. Because I can sell it.
Because it comes with thousands of dollars. Because it comes with thousands of dollars.
Yeah, it's like someone giving you the same thing and money. It doesn't make sense. And that's just for things that look the same, right? I mean, don't get me started on a 4 that, looks to the eye from a casual viewing distance better than a much worse centered or focused 7 or 8. That's going to cost you hundreds of thousands more. That's where things get to me, those become the no-brainers, for sure. And you look at what I listed a bunch of 10s that you can buy and it costs you $250,000, right? You use your eye, spend $2,500. Man, if you think there's $1,000 different in what you're looking at, I would debate that. I think I've done that with my own family, right? Where I've had my brother and my mom, and I'm like, I'll cover I'll put like tape or cover the flips and say, which one do you think is better? You know how many times they're shocked that the other one is, and let alone saying, well, that's $100,000 better, that's $50,000 better. So.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, you've used the term stickers in the last few minutes here, but by stickers, you are referring to the labels or the flips within the graded slabs.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to some comments here. We've had quite a few of them. Nikola Tesla says, eye appeal matters way more, at least for me. There are a lot of high-grade cards out there with terrible centering and other aesthetic flaws, but they look terrible, at least for the grade. And I think we can all agree on that. Michael Ham, good evening and good to see you as always. Aaron Daniels says, feverishly hunting a 54 tops Whitey Ford for 3 months, a nightmare for centering. Yeah, but at least you're not going to compromise, Aaron. All right, it doesn't sound like you're going to compromise, so hold out. I would encourage you to hold out. Peep says Surface is number 1 in my opinion, and I think Surface, as long as you're including the registration, the focus of the card as a component of the Surface, I'm 100% with you on that, Peeps. Rage is back. Good to see you and happy new year. Agree that centering is first overall. He goes on to say, when you go to the range, do you get extra points for shooting the sides of the bullseye? And then before that, do you look to the left or the sight and the center. Enough said. Yeah, good point right there. You get points for hitting it in the bullseye. Nick Martelli, good to see you again, says that's like with some PSA 9s that are off center that actually have an OC qualifier printed on the label. With vintage or 90s inserts, it can be mint, but the OC designation makes it tough to pull the trigger. Although, as I was mentioning to Matt the other day, I've met some people who feel that buying a card with an OC qualifier saves them a lot of money. They still get the great condition. Centering is not as important to them. And like Matt said, it's not up to us to tell anybody what's right, what's going to make you happy. If you like that, go for it. You're going to save a lot of money that way as well. Jeremy at Foul 5 Ball says, I look at corners first. And I think that stems back from like the 80s. I mean, that's the first thing I used to look at. Back then, corners were way more important than centering. Right? That's how I remember it. I had an LCS in the early 90s. It was all about corners, not all about centering. What's your recollection?
I remember noticing if things were really OC, but corners were very important back then because we were also in an era where things that we desired would go right into a penny sleeve or sometimes into then a screw down. So we were already in this era of preservation. So you're starting out with everyone wanting to preserve their cards. Hence, again, that's why, a 10 from 88 is, so much less expensive than a 10 from, 48 or 58. So I think that corners do take on more weight when you're talking about newer and newer pieces because they were being preserved immediately by us as kids. Whereas my dad, my uncles, they were putting these cards in their bike spokes and flipping them. We weren't doing that.
Exactly. Rage says corners are second for him. Aaron Daniels here says, wish I felt this informed even 4 years ago when I started buying Mickey mantles. I went for best grade I could afford. Now I make more discerning choices. I think in creating this episode, I used the word discerning to describe you, Matt, because I mean, I have all the respect in the world for anyone I consider to be a discerning collector, and you definitely fall into that. And it seems like Aaron Daniels has made his way there, and that comes with experience and time. You have to pay you have to pay a little bit of tuition, a little to get into the hobby, a little bit of training.
You have to go through the cards. Again, it took me, I was going through hundreds upon hundreds probably of examples of the 52 mantle or the 51 mantle before, it really sunk in. A centered or close to dead centered 52 mantle is rarer than one that's in 7 and 8 plus. If you add them all up, there's going to be less dead centered 52 mantles than there are mantles in grades 7, 8, 9, 10, 3/10s if you add all those together. And then what began to appeal to me even more is then I began to say, well, I would love this player's autograph. How rare is it to find that autograph on that card, on that card meaning any card, where the card has some eye appeal and the autograph. So now you take cards from an era where centering was very rare, and I want an autograph that has stood the test of time and is placed in the right section of the card. Now it's another layer. So it's, again, rarity. I think that it's specious sometimes to look at rarity in terms of population data. Well, look how few 10s there are. But yes, but the 10s, the 9s are almost identical. Whereas to me, rarity that's born of centering or rarity that's created by the athlete himself having touched the card, that rarity, to me as a collector, that rarity appeals to me more.
Yeah, I think that, there's definitely more to rarity than just the print run. There's all these other things that you've mentioned. And I think it's, you have to mature through this hobby, or you can try and fast track by consuming content and befriending experts and that sort of thing. But everything you just mentioned, it just reeks of experience to me. And I just love that. You mentioned about how, again, you can look at population reports for grading companies and see how many 9s or 10s or 8s or 7s are of a certain card. And but the rarity within there in terms of which ones present the best is something to consider. And this is really important when it comes to comping out a card. If you are looking to purchase a card and you want to get an idea of what you want to pay based on historical sales, you'd have to be able to dive in to drill deeper than just sales reports. You need pictures, because there could be a 9 that was terribly centered that could, and especially if you're the seller of a card, if you have that same card or a copy of that card in that same grade and you're looking to sell it and you see that the most recent comp on that was $10,000 but it was horribly centered, you may be justified in pricing yours at 1.5 to 2 times that amount or somewhere else, but something more.
I've seen 3s of certain cards outsell 6s, right? It just it happens more than we would think, especially when rare attributes like centering are in play. And I think that, again, it's how we define rarity, how we define what is best to us, how we define what is most attractive. I try to keep that evaluation as much about the card as possible, right? So again, to me, the sticker is not really the card. It is one grader's opinion of that card from a technical perspective at a given day. That verdict would change. Not to mention, none of us were at the grading constitutional convention 40 years ago when they decided corners weigh so much. I wasn't there. I didn't cast a vote. So why am I now going to put that on a pedestal, right? I have to decide for myself what I find attractive. So again, I'm trying to look at a card, shop, and go, wait, I see more of them that are not centered than are in high grade. Or I see my brother and I were talking about the 53 Topps mantle, and it's like, wait, so there's 94 8s, but there's only 50 of them signed? That's literally twice as rare. Of those 50 that are signed, how many look good? Yeah. So again, I think it's important. It's all about the collector doing the critical thinking for himself and not being too, it's not lazy. It's that I don't want to just let the pop data and let the stickers do all the work for me. I want to make my decisions, and I want to look at it from all the different angles first.
Yeah, I like how you said that we weren't at that meeting 40 years ago to decide how to weigh the different criteria and attributes of a card's condition. Rage says right here, I believe centering should be 60% of the grade. And that is 100% legitimate. I'm not saying that 60% of the grade should go to centering, but I believe Rage and everyone else out there has the complete autonomy to decide for themselves what percent of the grade should go to whatever attribute.
And then buy that way. And then Rage he's doing the grading, or she would when they're buying. That's what I'm doing, right? That's why there are cards where it's a 3 or a 4, and I'm bidding 8 money on it because that's how I see it.
Right.
That's
exactly.
I'm the buyer, I'm the collector. It's my opinion that counts, not the sticker's opinion, and I'm going to spend accordingly. That's why it's like you'll see a PSA 3 in the 52 mantle, one sold for like 160 some odd $1,000. People go, oh, that's crazy. No, that's what that buyer, those two bidders saw the beauty in that and acted accordingly. So it's not, again, you can't be governed by that VCP grid or by that pricing data. Or if you want, again, data is neutral. The pop reports are neutral. It's how buyers apply or misapply or process, or if there are errors in the processing of that data and the conclusions that are drawn, right? So it's important. You may see, someone might see a centered card set a record and go, oh, they're all going up. No, they're not going up. Those ones are going up. There's a demand for those. Similarly, we might see, so many times you see a card, sells for a poor price. It's like, oh, they're going down. No, they're not. The ugly ones are going down. What's happening, I think, in the hobby is that the attractive specimens and that whatever contributes to that overall eye appeal, it's almost like there are two different sets of data now. There's two different animals, two different ecosystems, one for the eye appealing cards that people are competing over and one for the others.
I agree. Yeah, completely agree with that. It's the way the things have gone, and that's okay. I mean, again, people are gonna do whatever makes them happy. Let's go to the Rage makes another great comment right here. We haven't even talked about this, but the color has when we talk about the surface or the print quality of a card, the registration is one thing, but how well did the ink, did the printing plates hit that cardboard at that time, or has it faded over time? Is another thing. If they've been left out in the light, that ink can fade over time. The color is so important, and really, you're not going to understand what that intended color is supposed to be unless you look at several copies of the card.
Yes.
So I think, and neither you nor I have mentioned this yet. Thanks to Rage for doing it, because color is huge. I recently picked up my 51 Bowman Willie Mays. I've been looking for one for over 15 years. And I wanted one that didn't have those typical, the lines coming down them, fish eyes or printing little circles in the name bar, and then color. A lot of those have different tints to the color. And I wanted something that had them all at a grade I could afford that was strong for the grade. I ended up with a 4, that I'm very happy with, but it's the color was so important to me on that card. Is color way up there for you too?
Yes, and color is part of when I say registration. To me, that's I say image quality, and I think color is a big part of that. And again, if you like, I noticed, for example, too, 75 Bretts. There's some color variation in some of them. And again, the way you shop for the card in question that you just mentioned with the Maze, you're doing the grading, right? You may see a 7 or an 8 of that card, and you're like, not to me, it's not. It's not my 8. So why should you then treat it as such? If someone else wants to, fine. So I applaud that. I think, and that's the way I look at it. And you have, like you said, you have to. I think comparative shopping is important. That's why I use that VCP website, because I want to see all the different, especially with the centered cards, the signed cards. I want to see what they look like, and I need to compare with the one I'm thinking of. If I see that there are 4 or 5 others that are better looking to me, better means better looking to me, not higher grade, then I know, I can be really discerning here. But if you're looking, like, for example, the first time I saw a centered 52 mantle and then bought it and really broke the pricing grid for it, it was because I had seen so many, and I knew through comparative shopping, wait, this is quite rare for this. This has the rare attribute. Same with you with the color with the Maze.
Yeah, exactly. And I want to just put some caution out there for people too, that when you're looking online at cards, people can add filters to their images to brighten up that color. I don't know how well they can tighten up the centering or the registration, but the color can definitely be enhanced by image. So if you're buying something sight unseen or remotely that way, just be careful. Obviously, if you're buying a card at a card show or in person at a card shop or just in person, you can get a much better look at that. One other caution I want to put out there is that a lot of sellers have caught wind to the fact that the hobby generally is looking for cards with stronger eye appeal. So you'll see subtitles on eBay, as an example, all the time that will say strong for the grade or undergraded. That may or may not be their true opinion. It just may be a sales tactic. So make sure you agree with those statements before you put a bid in or commit to purchasing a card like that. Does that resonate with you at all, Matt?
Oh, absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. It's the individual has to make the decision for their collection, what appeals to them, right? If it's just like a seller may say centered and it's not eye appealing, you might not agree. Same thing goes for the flip.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Twizzard makes a comment here. He says PSA, and I think he means like all third-party human grading companies require transparency. How do we know? I don't know what payola really means in this concept.
Payola is like with the radio. They used to give money to get certain songs played.
Thank you. So, so how do we know that couldn't be a factor within the grading company internally when grading? And I think you just have to really make sure that you agree with the grade yourself. Don't just take it for what it is. There's many factors involved, especially that they're graded by humans who have good days and bad days. And that's just the fact. And, you said you've experimented. A lot of people, there are people out there who've made a living buying a card that they feel is undergraded, sending it back in, and it comes back with a higher grade. So it's really important it can go both ways. It could be overgrade. You could be paying more than you should for a card because they overgraded it that day versus undergrading. Buying undergraded cards is a great strategy as long as it is truly undergraded, in your opinion, I would say. So a good point there by Twizzard, and good to see you again. We talked about becoming an expert. T-Dot throws out that cliche, 10,000 hours if you really want to be knowledgeable about something. I think that standard must be lower now with just the access to information over the past several years. Aaron Daniels here, Matt, makes the comment, I think ones can be wildly varied from being torn, stained, creased, having paper loss to aesthetically solid. It is wild. Matt and I discussed this the other day, Matt, when I mentioned that, you know, the range of conditions in a 1 might be this wide, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 to 10. Like the difference between a 9 and a 10 can be this big, whereas the difference within a 1 can be this big. Do you want to just speak to that in your experience?
Yes, and I think that's, to me, that's why I don't like paying. I like to say to myself, I never want to pay for corners, right? Like, to me, I don't mind paying a lot to receive a lot, right? Because if we take a very beat up 1, right, and a beautiful 1, like, again, because there's that big spectrum within 1s, within 2s, even 3s, right? Because 3s, you know, can often have creasing, and there are 3s that don't. There are 3s that have a very obtrusive crease. There are 3s that have very mild, subtle creases. So there's so much, I think, and that to me is where the value, those pound for pound best cards lie, right? Whereas I'm paying a lot and getting very little between a 9 and a 10. Like, to me, I'll look, like, oh, that's where that big price jump is at 7 grade. Well, I'll just find a 7 hiding in a 6 holder, or sometimes a 5.5 holder. That to me is, and then it's more fun. And then you're hunting and you're also using your eye. Because we've all seen, there are too many instances. Anyone who's played that grading game sees how, again, any card that's a 7 graded 10 times, it's not going to come back a 7 10 times.
Yeah, agree. It's just the way it works. Twizzard here says value pertains to the buyer, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, yet standards still exist. That sums up the reality really well. What we were saying earlier about it's up to you. Great, you can grade the card yourself before you buy it. You don't have to just believe somebody else. It's really going to be your item and your money. So make sure you feel that at least the price you're paying, you're getting a good value pound for pound, as Matt, and I like how you say that.
And the system tries, though. I think that standards are, I think what third-party grading does is certainly adds a tremendous value. It allows us to transact with cards online, and having an attempt at a standard is certainly a positive thing. But I think ultimately the individual, their opinion about the card for their collection, that should always trump whatever the verdict was from the standard companies.
Agreed. T-Dot here says, I always said niceness should be a 5th category. And really, eye appeal is, I believe, what T-Dot is getting at there. And I think a lot of people agree with you on that right there. T-Dot, hello to you, Collector's Dream. Good to see you. Chris Olivo says, I'd rather buy a well-centered 8 over an off-centered 9. I think I'm with you 100% of the time on that. Michael Ham says, do you agree PSA is not giving the grade of 10s or grading certain key cards harder? All I know is that there's only 2 Wayne Gretzky O-Pee-Chee PSA 10s, and I've seen 9s that are nicer than the 10s. So I think I believe there is some truth to that, but I don't know for sure.
It's in their best interest. I mean, they want to keep, and I understand it. Look, at the end of the day, it's a company that needs to make a profit and wants to make a profit. Right? So how are they going to do that? They're going to encourage people to spend the most money on their highest grades. They're going to try to limit the population, the supply of those highest grades. And that will in turn drive submissions for people chasing those highest grades. So all the profit motive at every successive juncture is going to point towards limiting that. But I also think that they talk about, like, in the TV industry, like peak TV. I think we're in like a peak value time for collectors because they're hammering beautiful cards. I mean, I'm buying cards in 5 holders that look like 7.5s and 7s that look like 9s. It's fantastic if you're after the best looking card, and it's saving us tons of money. Just don't be a slave to the grade. And I mean, it's a great time to buy.
Well, here we go. Mets and Steelers fan says, buy the card, not the grade. Words to live by. He or she is quoting that, not his original term or hers, but definitely something that we've heard before, and I think will ring true forever. Let's just get a bit into how you also collect autographed cards, and I believe you're collecting autographed rookie cards. Is that right, or autographed mantle run? What's your thoughts on autographed cards, and what are you collecting?
If I love the player, a great deal. I want to have an example of their autograph, especially guys that have passed away. So that's the sole determinant in what I pursue. And it began with Mantle, and it began with just coming across one on eBay where I was like, wow, look how beautiful that is. Again, the signature of the individual has to be beautiful. There are certain people's signatures that are aesthetically pleasing, and then there are some where you're like, what is that scribble? Cursive. They're not teaching cursive these days. No. So Ruth has a beautiful signature. Mantle has a beautiful signature. Gehrig, Mariano, Jeter's got a distinctive signature. So it just began with seeing one, and it was at a price that I could afford. I didn't do any research. I just bought it. And then I loved looking at it so much, and I loved the notion of that he held it and signed it. And then I also began to say to myself, marveling at it, wow, what are the odds that a card like this, it was a 61, a card that is this centered, and 61s have a lot of problem, the 61 Mantle, with print issues, that black, sometimes it's not very deep. Sometimes it results in a lot of stray print. 60 Mantle I found autographed, and the Mantle that's batting is often out of register. If you ever look at the batting Mantle in that red pane, it often has weird shadowing effects to it. And so I began to say, what are the odds of that? And then I realized they keep track of pop data. They don't keep track of autograph grade. And again, not that grade is end all be all, quite the opposite, but for autographs, it's especially a gauge. That cards, you can have a 3 that's beautiful, but if the autograph's a 3, odds are you're not going to like the way it looks. And I was blown away by the rarity. Again, you take I don't know the numbers offhand for all of them. I actually did a chart of this on my Instagram because a lot of people would message me and ask. And one day I was sick with a cold a few weeks ago, so I was just laying in bed and I just brought up the numbers, and it was astounding. There's some cards, like I think it was the 59, where it's 10 times rarer a signed one than an 8 or higher.
Oh, wow.
It really blew me away. And I loved that. Again, I'd rather rarity be created because Mickey Mantle touched the card than a card doctor. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that I really responded to the rarity and being created that way. And especially the difficulty of what are the odds of a somewhat pretty centered card being brought to be autographed? Because those are the ones you handled and loved. I remember my 86 Top Strawberry that I brought to Darryl to sign in 1986. That thing was already worn. I was like taking it around. So the odds of the card still having some appeal, the odds of the autograph being in the right place and being bold, that really impressed me. And I just got into it from there.
And keep in mind, to everybody listening, watching, that we're not talking about pack pulled autos from recent years. We're talking about autographs on vintage cards, in-person autos. We're talking about players like Mickey Mantle. I mean, you can talk about whatever you want, but I know that you, Matt, you're collecting certain players, like an autographed Ty Cobb T206, or an autographed Jackie Robinson 48 Leaf or 49 Bowman, a 33 Gaudy Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruths. I mean, these are extremely rare, of course, because these players have long passed. And that's kind of what I was asking Matt about, versus, I see there's some talk about sticker autographs in the chat, which yeah, I'm not a huge fan of either, but I just wanted to point that out. Bobby Burrell, 2 days in a row, good to see you, says, very good or 3 grades on a 10-point scale, really walks the line between a crease, a paper wrinkle, plus how far up does a corner ding go before it is a crease. So I think, and I agree, 3 is like the most uncomfortable grade for me. I don't want 3. I'd rather have I'd rather have a 2 that I feel looks like a 4 or better than a 3 that looks like a 3 or a 4 even, because sometimes 3 is just a grade that I've never gotten my head around. I've never been happy with a 3. I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's some great ones out there.
Yeah, he nails it. Bobby nails it because of that definition, the way that grade is applied technically. I mean, I've got some 3s that really do look like mint cards from 6 feet away on the wall. It's amazing what you can find in that 3-4 zone.
Right, for sure.
Oh, and also what you were saying, I just wanted to say There was an auction a year ago, 2 years ago. The Uncle Jimmy cards are sort of like the ultimate signed vintage cards. There was signed Gowdy Ruths, and I was one of the underbidders on one of the Gehrig's. Just amazing to think that those titans held it and touched it and signed it. It's really, really wild, especially as you compare the population numbers to, again, Babe Ruth touching and signing that is absolute, right? But saying, well, look at how rare this 8 is, that taking the 8 as the determinant of the rarity, but we know that that's not absolute, because the 8 might be a 7, the 8 could be an 8.5, the 8 could be a 7.5, versus Ruth signed it or he didn't sign it. So that there's more, the solidity to that draws me to it.
Yeah, fair. I hear what you're saying, and then it really comes down to taste and what do you like. Is that like, are you looking for, as a collector, are you interested only in rarity, or scarcity, or are you looking for just a copy of the card as it came out of the pack that is good enough for your collection based on your needs, your means, and all that? And that's going to be up to the individual collector to decide. Nick Martelli makes a comment similar to yours. Safe to say that that autos now are brutal compared to old autographs. It's truly shocking and disappointing. And I think he's just getting at how athletes today, they don't sign their name. They just might do a check mark or a couple of swirls and call it a day. And maybe that's also a function of having to sign thousands of autographs at a time, especially when they're getting pads of stickers that they need to sign. So it can be tough, and I understand those comments for sure. Listen, we're past an hour already, Matt. This show is meant to be an hour long. We could go for 2 more easily. I know we said that last time too when we were on together with Rob Gerard, the sports card therapist. But I do like to ask every guest of Collectible Live. This is the show we're doing for Collectible, the fractional ownership platform, which is releasing, as I mentioned at the top of the show, a press release tomorrow with some pretty big announcements. If you weren't here at the beginning and you want to hear it, once this is over, just rewind and you'll hear us. You'll hear me go over that probably at around the 3 or 4 minute mark of this episode. So go check that out. But I want to ask you, Matt, how do you see fractional ownership fitting into the overall hobby landscape as we move forward in 2023?
Well, I think it's here to stay, whether I participate in it or not. And I have tried it at the outset, just because anything new, I want to experience it and develop an opinion of it. I think, from a financial perspective, I totally see the logic. And I also see the logic from a collecting perspective, especially with pieces that are really sort of unobtainable. So I think it's definitely going to be here to stay. And it certainly makes a ton of sense from a financial perspective for people who invest in it.
Cool. Well, I appreciate your thoughts there. And I see Sean Red here says, keep going. We're gonna have to end this episode right away here, everybody. But I will let you know that I will be inviting Matt onto my other show, Sports Cards Live, which I do Saturday nights live. Many of you are aware of that. We're gonna have Matt on an episode of that, and we're gonna go and just talk this out at greater length, more even longer form than 1 hour, and we'll take questions and comments. So just watch my YouTube channel for announcements on that, but we'll have him back for sure. Thank you, Aaron Daniels. Great to have you join the show tonight. Thanks to everybody who did join. Reminder that next Sunday on Collectible Live, our guest will be Collectible CEO Ezra Levine, who will talk about the bids wanted in competition strategy that they are unleashing upon their platform later this month, along with some other things too. Ezra will be joining to answer questions and describe the new initiatives that they are taking, the evolution of Collectible, as we will learn more about next week. Thank you, Nick Martelli. Abdil, good to see you there. T-Dot, thank you so much. And everyone else, appreciate it. Matt, I'm going to give you the final words, and then we're going to end this.
Thank you so much. And it's always fun to chat cards. I'll do it with you anytime. And when Ezra reached out and said, hey, I think maybe would you be interested in talking? It was when he mentioned you. I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do it, because we had such a good time talking on Rob's thing. So it was all about you, my man.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you so much. Again, everybody, have a great week ahead. We'll see you next Sunday on the show. And with that, this episode is over. Thank you. I do see final comments. Rage, thank you. Diamond, thank you. Bobby, good to see you. And thank you so much. And Mets and Steelers fan, I do hear you on that as well. So with that, everybody, this episode